Hello and welcome to Somerset Highlander. Today we will continue to create a wildlife pond. Before you actually begin to plant, you need to plan a little bit beforehand. There are four main types of plants for a pond. You've got algae, you've got floating plants, submerged plants and emergent plants. Initially I was looking at the emergent plants and to put them on the marginals of the pond along with some oxygenators just to get the pond a little bit healthier, more oxygen and nutrients and cover for any wildlife. In early April, I had no problem getting the lily and the submergent plants for the marginals. However, I discovered quite quickly that the oxygenators are a little bit more of a problem. Most of them are not hardy enough against frost, certainly when you're putting them in as young plants. Therefore, I was going to have to wait until late April or middle of May before some of these would become available. So once I'd acquired my plants, I then came back and drew up a plan to try to match the space I had with where I thought the plants would best go. So as you can see here, I've just drawn out a little basic map of the pond and then tried to match up where I felt the plants would best go to get the most growth by considering how much shade or sun each could survive in, but also how deep the marginal areas were. So it's April the 9th, 2022, and as you can see, the pond is still empty. However, not for long. We have just acquired our first batch of plants, which we'll be getting placed in the pond today, and I'll run you through them. So for me, this is the first time I've actually tried to create a wildlife pond. So it's very much a learning process for me. I'm sure I will make mistakes. I'm sure some things will struggle in this pond that we've planted, but hopefully we'll also learn which plants will thrive, and over time we can create a perfect habitat. So if you've never bought a lily for your pond before, if you don't have a pond, you're doing it the first time, pretty straightforward. You go down to an aquatic centre, garden centre that does aquatic plants, and you'll find these submerged in a tank. They come already prepared in a basket, so they're already weighed down. And this particular water lily, it needs to eventually lie in between 30 to 90 centimetres, so approximately 10 to 30 inches of water depending, and it's also when it fully grows, it will be sort of a width of between 70 and 90 centimeters on the surface, so it will cover quite a lot of the pond. So it's the reason why at the moment we've only got one. We may choose to have more in the future, but we need to see how it develops and grows, and also whether it survives, quite honestly. Obviously the handle on this basket is still there at the moment because we know we're going to have to move it over time as the lily stretches its leaves to the top, and then we move it again into deeper water. In terms of when you first plant a lot of water plants, make sure that so for instance, if they say between 30 and 90 centimeters it should lie in terms of the depth of water, you would tend to start off with putting in half that amount, so between 15 and 45 centimeters in this case, and then gradually make it deeper and deeper as it starts to settle into its environment and grow and become more vigorous. So initially I've just planted these two plants. So on the left we have the water mint, and on the right two we have blue flag. It's an iris. I've planted them here at the moment because they need to go slightly deeper, but again, when you first get them, you need to put them in shallower water than to allow them to establish themselves. The water mint in this case, when it's fully grown, you need to have it in about, well, between 0 and 20 centimeters of water, but it will give you above water about 30 to 60 centimeters of height. The other thing you need to think about when you're planting in the pond is how much sun or shade a plant needs. We're sort of mid-afternoon here and we're in full sun, so it's quite partial to full sun, but it will also cope with partial shade. The blue flag, on the other hand, although it can cope with full sun and part shade, it prefers full sun. So the next one we've got here is lesser spearwort, and we've planted this quite shallow water. It needs between 0 and 10 centimeters below the surface, and it will get to within 25 and 30 centimeters once it's fully grown above the surface. I've got a second one to the right here. Again, I'm just trying it out there at the moment, see if it does okay. We'll probably move them into deeper water, or certainly move them around as and when they become more established. In terms of the actual flowers you get from this, there should be a nice sort of yellow sort of buttercup type flower, which is quite delicate, and we'll have lots of sort of branching green stems. Its Latin name is Ranunculus flammula. Apologies for pronunciation to any Latin lovers, but that apparently means ranunculus means little frog. So obviously if we can provide some little frog plant for some frogs, that would be great. So next we have a couple of flowering rush plants, and actually interspersed between them is a marsh marigold. The marsh marigold probably won't stay here long term, but at the moment it's the only place I can put it while it gets established and grows bigger. The flowering rush, they prefer to grow on their own really, because they're quite aggressive. Need to be about 3 to 25 centimeters below the water, and 60 to 100 centimeters above the water when they're fully grown. So you can see there's a lot of growth going to come from them hopefully this year. The marsh marigold will produce a lot of bright yellow flowers, but unfortunately this tends to be earlier in the year, from March and April, and sadly, although it might produce something, we're a little bit later in the season. Again, it doesn't need to sit in much water, between 0 and 15 centimeters, but it should give you a nice sort of covering of between 30 and 50 centimeters. So here we have marsh marigold again on the left, but on the right we have the watercress, which is going to produce a dark green foliage with a small white flower. Hopefully between May and August we should see those flowers. You would tend to plant this in about 0 to 10 centimeters of water, and then hopefully it will grow to be between 15 and 60 centimeters high. As you can see, straight behind we have the wildflower meadow, and then the frog caves along here. In terms of how many we've put in here, at the moment I've only put 2 in, because I don't know how big they're going to get in terms of how much of the pond they'll be covering. When you're looking to create a wildlife pond, you really want to be aiming to cover between, well, probably about 2/3 of the pond in vegetation. That leaves enough room for oxygenation, etc., but is a lot of cover, and that's what really wildlife want. They want cover to hide from predators, but also to ambush their food. So you really want to make sure that you've got options all round. So this particular watercress, as you can see on the right, is only just poking through the water at the top, but hopefully in a day or two, with some vigorous growth, all the leaves will be above water and it'll be quite comfortable and settled. The only other issue I've got here is I don't know how much sunlight it's going to get and whether it's going to cope. If we then pan right, the first thing you'll see will be the Dutch rush. This will actually stay pretty much all year round as it is now. Insects love it. They can obviously climb out of the water on these stems, or they can fly around and land on them. I think dragonfly nymphs will come out when they're starting to transform into a full dragonfly. And then further to the right, you've got yellow flag. This is another iris, and as the name suggests, it's yellow when it flowers. For anyone who hasn't actually bought aquatic plants before, they tend to come in baskets that are already filled with nutrients, soil, and usually some gravel, just to give some weight to what would otherwise be quite a buoyant plant. Quite handy really. They'll tend to last a year or two in each of these baskets before you might have to take them out, separate them, and then put them into numerous other baskets. But it's a cheap way of you growing and filling your pond really. So here we are. We've now planted all the water plants in the pond that we bought today. I fully agree, it doesn't look much. However, a number of these will grow on considerably